welcome back to the Lovin Dubai show. Meet Deema Al Alami, the brains behind 48 Stories of Exile from Palestine, with 15 years of experience in education and an MA in education. She's VP and a mom and author of This Is My Body, Don't Touch Me as well. She started her Instagram to bridge the gap in parent-to-child reading, sharing tips and book recommendations to spark love of reading. But today she returns to talk about her new book, 48 Stories of Exile for Palestine. It's absolutely beautiful from the cover, but we're going to dive into what's inside. Welcome to the show. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for having me again. It's such a pleasure to be here and to speak about this book on Love in Dubai. You know, I always say this is the page that spreads kindness and compassion, and you're the first to repost these videos. So this book is exactly about that. So thank you so much for having me.
Not at all.
Thank you for being here. So my first question to you is, what inspired you to have this book, to write this book?
So basically, my mom is Iraqi, my dad's Palestinian, and I grew up in Jordan. I always say I'm Arab, but more importantly, I'm human. I got really affected by what's happening around the world. And I remember when there was the earthquake 2 years ago, I believe, in Syria, Turkey, and I was just like trying to help, and people started thinking I'm Turkish or Syrian. I'm like, no, I'm human, but I was devastated with what I saw. So for this book, obviously with the genocide that's taking place and everything that's happening in Gaza, I was feeling very deflated, and I was like feeling lost, demotivated, helpless in so many ways. And then I saw a video, of Hajja Hadia. I think you shared her picture, and she was this really, really old lady dressed beautifully in a Palestinian tobe, you know, and she was in a hospital injured, and one of those young reporters went up to her and she started kind of like teasing him and flirting with him in a very innocent, cute way. And I'm like, is she injured in a hospital being exiled again because she had moved from Tul Karim? And I'm like, but she's full of love, you know, she's full of love, she's full of passion, she's smiling, she's happy. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, how can she do that? And I'm sitting here with all the privileges, feeling like I cannot do anything. I'm so negative, I'm so sad. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna use what from her, inspired by her, I'm going to use my love for storytelling to do something about what's happening. And this is where it all started. And then it also hit me because she only took two things when she was forced out of her home. She took a paper that showed her identification card, and it showed that she was born in 1944 in Tul Karim, you know, which is a city in Palestine. And the other thing is a picture of her current home in Gaza. So when I saw that, I'm like, oh my God, people who were born before Al-Nakba in 1948, you know, they're quite old, and, you know, like they will pass, unfortunately, very soon. And if no one tells their stories are going to die with them. So I had both a sense of, oh my God, I'm full of love now, and I want to use like everything in my heart, love for my land, love for my people in a book. And at the same time, I want to preserve that. So this is how the book 48 Stories of Exile started.
Wow, what a beautiful initiative by you, and also how amazing for the people to know that their stories have been honored and will be reshared through time in the correct way. So first of all, what you've done is amazing. But tell us about, so 48 Stories, I'm sure it features 48 Stories, but tell us about the process. So you were inspired, and then what happened next?
So I was inspired, and I actually decided to dedicate the book to Hajja Hadia. So you open the dedication page, and it's her.
Beautiful.
Unfortunately, she was martyred and in front of her home, but this book is for her. Yeah, she was drinking tea and she was assassinated, but this book is for her, and inshallah, every house in the world will have a picture, a part of Hajja Hadia with him or in their home. So basically, what happened is, all I knew, I wanted to preserve these stories. So I know. It's really it was such an emotional process. I ended up actually hospitalized because of this book, because even the stories, and I always say, yes, I may have led this, you know, but I am so grateful. We had over 80 people work on this book, and over 16 to 17 nationalities. We had Americans, British, Irish, Russian, Indian, Pakistani. So many people wanted to come together, and till now, everyone's like, how can I help? Part two. I'm like, just give me time. I don't want to get divorced, and I want my kids to love me. So this is a community project, and it's just about, you know, being compassionate to one another and understanding, you know, every single one of us wants to live in dignity and peace and love, you know. And how I started was like, okay, share your exile stories, and then on Instagram. And then I was flooded with stories, you know, and I'm like, okay, what do I do with those stories? So this is where I asked my community, and I reached out to Nahla, the co-producer, Nahla Al-Malki, and I'm like, okay, I need your help. She's so good with like getting things organized. And we started organizing the stories and selecting the ones that we want to include in the book. And then we're like, okay, how do we organize them? We had many stories, and we're like, okay, let's organize them in cities. So in the book, you'll find 13 cities of exile, many of which, they're not only from 1948 and Nakba, there's in 67, there's in between, there's even now. So we have Gaza, Al-Quds, Nablus, Majdal. And then I'm like, okay, I'm a children's book author, and I usually write in Arabic. I love writing in Arabic, and this is my mother tongue. But I'm like, the message here is to get the English-speaking world to understand our history, our story from our side, and people just like you and me. And I always say, although I'm a reader, but maybe I don't enjoy reading Edward Said, who I love, like who has a 600-page book, Every story in this book is 200 to 800 pages, words long. So it's very simple. You can open it, read it, but really get the essence of what Palestinians went through since 1948. And I'm so grateful also for every single illustrator who worked pro bono. So we have unique illustrations for every city in the book. And they all worked pro bono, the editors, the illustrators, everyone in this book.
So I want to get back to when I first asked you the first question. You said that you are human.
Yes.
You do not, because your mother is Iraqi and your dad is Palestinian and your mother yourself.
Yes.
So do you raise your kids to be as well like only human, or do they say like, oh yeah, I am from this country, so I only relate to this country? So how is it as well? Not only how do you raise your kids like in that sense, like as a human.
Yeah.
How do you manage, with like the, of course your schedule must be filled,
yes.
And I just can't imagine because like, people go like, oh my God, it's a lot of work. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. So how do you manage?
To be honest, the first part of your question is my children are confused, because their dad is of a different ethnicity as well. He's Jordanian, British, and like it's just confusing. On National Day, I got a flag, and I get my son a T-shirt with like a British flag, American flag, Jordanian, Palestinian, and a bit of Iraqi. And I'm like, how many more flags can we put? So honestly, I'm just like, just be kind, and like I don't care where you're from, as long as you're kind, as long as you're compassionate, as long as you have empathy towards others. That's what I care about. For me, that's the most important thing. That's number one. Number two, I mean, listen, with everything that's going on, if people for me in Gaza are figuring out how to parent in these very difficult circumstances, if they're becoming so, like innovative in how they survive, I found it as no excuse. I think, I for 4 months, this is like 30,000 words. And again, coordinating with over 60 people and publishing a book within this very, very limited time frame with all the legalities. We ended up publishing in Jordan. Like it's such a complicated process. But to do that, every time I felt like deflated, it's not that I didn't complain. I did, especially to Nahla and Fatima, our lead editor. But I'm like, listen, they're surviving a genocide for that long. If they can do it, I have to do it. So there was no question about me figuring it out and getting it done.
Speaking of, actually, it's great to have you on the show because obviously you work in education.
Yes.
And although this isn't a children's book, we do ask, I'm sure there's parents who, struggle with how to tell the story of Palestine and what's going on right now to their kids. Do you have any tips on that?
So for me, honestly, because of everything that's happening, a lot of people created resources, resources to support, about Palestine, books. And I think at the end of the day, if you simplify it, just like any other question that you ask, for me, I always make it a metaphor between, a bully and bullied and bystanders, So forget the labels. But, what would you do in a case where you see someone bullying someone else? How can you stand up for that person? Do you always stand up in the same way? Are there different ways to stand up for that person? And for me, what I love about this book, although I always say it's 11 plus, just because they're exile stories, so they might be emotionally heavy. But, if you look at the illustrations, there are a lot of conversation starters in this book. And we included in every story actual pictures, real pictures of the main characters. So even if you're sitting with your child, you don't necessarily need to read every single word in the actual personal narratives. But you can look at the picture of Jaffa and speak about the oranges. You can look at Akka and speak about the domes that you can see there. And these are the conversation starters, because I always say, regardless of what the humanitarian cause is, if you're in love with that country, if you're in love with that cause, you'll find a way to fight fight for it. You'll find a way to speak up for it. And that's what matters when it comes to our children.
So, we live in the era of digital.
Yes.
Everything is digital. Kids probably they have iPads, they have phones, and they read off the phone, they read off the iPad. And it's kind of hard to limit what information gets to them. And as a kid, their minds they're like sponges. So whatever they read or whatever they watch is kind of absorbed into them. So how do you manage to control that? What books do you choose to your kids for them to read?
So for me, again, it depends. I have a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old actually, and a 3-year-old. So the 7-year-old has a mind of his own now. So the control is a bit kind of limited. But again, I always link reading. Reading is a lifestyle, and for me, it affects every part of your life. So if he's going through something, I try to prompt him into reading certain books, And I think reading before bed, and it's not only before bedtime, but sitting with your son or your daughter and reading certain things and relating, we often try to prompt our kids with questions and telling them, oh, did you experience this or that? But when I read a story with Hazza or Mirad, my kids, I always say, oh my God, this character, it reminds me when I had work and I felt anxious and I was nervous before this interview, and I had butterflies. So every time I read with them, I try to relate to what's happening in the story or the book that we're reading, so that they know that this is a chance for you to tell me whatever it is that's on your mind. And I think that's more powerful than just reading. It's actually the conversation you have through the books.
Speaking of conversation through the books, and briefly to go back to this one, is there any stories? So say if I pick it up, I've got 3 minutes to read it.
Yes. Oh
what page would you direct me to? Or is there any story that really kind of touched you?
Honestly, this is such a tough question, because although I've read every single story, narrative, I would say more than 60 times, every time I read these stories, I get so emotional, and what's nice is because we have 48 distinct authors, we maintain their stories, their storytelling style and their voices. And, the stories were built based on voice notes from great grandparents, from pictures, from letters, and when you read that, I hope, this is what I pray. I always say, Palestinians are always described in numbers, 33,000 have been killed. 77,000 have been injured. But behind every single number, there's a story. And this is what this book does. When you read these stories, you'll see that we spoke a lot about before the exile. What were their hobbies? What were their professions? What was their favorite food? And you'll get to understand that just like every single one of us, Palestinians and any oppressed people, they're people just like us, they wanted to grow their families. They had love stories, some of them were mischievous, some of them were, and this is what you'll find here. So I always say, read the first story, and read the last story. The last story is from Gaza as well. I think people may have not noticed that, but we intentionally made the last story be from Gaza, because I think if we were to write a book about what's happening now, it would be 2,700 volumes. Yeah, exactly.
So I want to get back to digital reading, since I am from the new generation, and I am all the time I read off my phone and off my laptop. So do you prefer books or digital reading?
So for me, I use Kindle. So, I'm a Kindle fan, and I always say if you start using Kindle, you'll never go back to paper book. But for children, if they're starting to read, it's definitely paperback or physical books, because it's different. I want my son, if my son is 1, I want him to interact with the book. I want him to bite it, to throw it, because I want them to associate the book as if it's a toy, and for kids, they can get distracted on the iPads and so on. So I would say if they are emerging readers, or as 0 to 6 years old, I always say paperback. But for adults, I think save the planet, go Kindle, use Kindle. I don't know. Casey's
because I used to use a Kindle for years, and then I don't read as much now, but I'd forget the books that I read because they didn't have the cover. That cover is very memorable.
Yes.
And it even evokes a sense of nostalgia.
100%.
The colors are beautiful, and that makes me resonate with the story. So therefore, I bin the Kindle.
Kindle, and you went back to print. Yeah. Honestly, for me, again, books are beautiful. I mean, I love going to bookstores and smelling the books, and I'm that person oh my God, the smell of the books and so on. But I don't know, I guess as long as you read, that's what I care about, to be honest,
very finally, before you leave us, when did the book launch and how can people get their hands on it?
So basically the book launched almost 3 weeks ago, and we decided to gift all of the copies, so they do not exist here. They're in with PCRF because 100% of the sales will go actually to support orphans and amputees. So alhamdulillah, honestly.
Amazing.
We obviously want it to be legal, so unfortunately we cannot sell it here, but it's owned by PCRF. PCRF are selling it. You can buy it on 48stories.com.
Okay.
So you buy it and it's shipped from abroad to internationally. And the reason why we are selling it for $48 is to honor every single family that shared their story, and for you to feel like with every dollar you're actually supporting an orphan or an amputee be in Gaza.
Amazing. 48stories.com
Yes.
to get your hands on it. I think what you've done is amazing. I can't wait to give it a read.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. I can only imagine the blood, sweat and tears that went into to make it. So from all sides, thank you so much for your time
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming back. Guys, that brings us to the end of our show. As always, we're back with you tomorrow morning, same time, same place. Goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
And